Hey everybody, and welcome to Hell is for Children. This show is on every Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, which is 2100 hours Central European Time. And my name is Geerte Frenken, and this show is all about the topic of protective mothers and their children. So what's a protective mother? A protective mother tries to protect her child or children from their abusive fathers by many means necessary, which is an uphill battle in today's global corrupt family court system that thrives on paternal entitlements. And today's guest is protective mother and child advocate Patrice Lenowitz. She is the executive director of the Nurtured Parents Support Group for Survivors of Domestic Abuse. She's also the co-founder of the Children's Justice Campaign with actress Kelly Rutherford. And Patrice Lenowitz is the community educator for the Center for Hope and Safety. And she's also a grassroots activist in the family court CPS reform project, We the Children. Now, Patrice is also a co-playwright of the theatrical production Forbidden to Protect with author and domestic violence expert Lundy Bancroft, which is expected to open to audiences in the spring of 2017. And Patrice is also the producer of Lundy Bancroft's webinar, Why Does He Do That? Inside the Minds of Angry and Controlling Men. This will be released in the fall of 2016, which will be shortly. So I'm very honored to have Patrice on as a guest today. Welcome to Hell is for Children, Patrice.
Thank you so much. I am so grateful to you for having the show and give us an opportunity to talk about these issues. So thank you.
Well, thanks for joining me today. Can you start the interview sharing with the audience how you came to be a protective mother?
Sure. It's a very common story that I find that many of our members through the Nurture Parent share. Interestingly enough, it's a topic in conversation that we don't talk about. Which begins fundamentally with a woman's inequality in the States and around the world. When we get married, we begin to lose our status. Many of us choose to stay home, so we may have had education, careers, businesses, and we choose to stay home with our children. And then there's an imbalance, right there. There's an economic imbalance for women, and that's how we begin. When you throw in the mix any kind of abuse, whether it's a partner that struggles with alcohol or drug addiction, whether it's a domestic violence offender, whether it's somebody who's sexually abusing your child, now we have a compounded problem because not only are we not seen as equal in law and society, I'm talking about women's rights and equality. Now you're going to a court system that's systemically and endemically biased against women and children. Women and children are considered to be property of the man in law and society. I wasn't around when this created, and I hope to be around when it's no longer an issue and crisis, because this is of crisis proportions. For me personally, I did change my direction in life after I got married and chose to have children. The greatest gifts anyone could ever be blessed enough is to become a parent and become a conscious parent, somebody who really chooses to have this child and raise this child and love this child and nurture this child, only to, in my situation, recognize that I was getting deeper and deeper and deeper in as an abused woman. Now, for me, and much like society, as you mentioned before, I'm a community educator, and I go out and I speak about these issues to a wide range of audiences, and it's interesting how the public still perceives domestic violence as violence, the act of actually hurting somebody. But what about the verbal and the emotional and the psychological and the humiliation and the coercive control and the economic binding that they have us because we no longer have a means to get out. They control the finances. So now we're being economically controlled as well. And in my situation, I'm no different. I'm somebody who saw myself as a strong, empowered woman. And after years of being in an abusive marriage, I was so far from the person I was or the person I was meant to be, because I no longer could breathe. The abuse was consuming. And, it's almost like we make these choices. I'm in this marriage because I have children, and I'm going to make it work. And I can take the abuse because it's not affecting my children. And you give it a couple of years, and then you recognize how it does affect the children. It impacts them. But you're further and further away from society, away from your friends, away from any ability to get out. Now, fortunately for me, I was in marriage counseling, and the marriage counselor said to us, my husband and I at the time, "You're an abuser, you're a victim, and I will not see you two together. I will be happy to work with you separately, but I will never see you two together." I was shocked. I was appalled. I was, what? That's not me. That's not me. I'm an empowered woman. Okay, I'm a stay-at-home mom, and he controls all the money and makes me feel like crap. But if he puts his hands on me, I'll fight back. So I can't be a victim. And I was so conditioned to this myth, this misunderstanding that our general public carries. And that is, to be an abused woman, you have to be put in the hospital. And that's just not the case. Mm-hmm. The reality was I could not even breathe anymore. The reality was it felt as if he was siphoning my soul every single day. I was no longer recognizable to myself. When I made the decision to leave the last time, this is an important thing to discuss. It doesn't take an abused victim 1 or 2 times to get out. There's a statistic that it takes an abused woman 7 attempts before she actually leaves. I'm a statistic. 7 times. It took me 7 times that I attempted to leave and failed and reconciled and tried to make it work for my children. Honestly, when I left the 7th time, though, after years of therapy, I went on a healing journey. I read every book there was on domestic violence, on healing myself, on how to raise my children that have been exposed to this. I was in a really good place. Economically speaking, my husband and I had money. I was not concerned about the outcome afterwards. I was concerned that if I wasn't well, if I didn't do the work, that my children would not have their mother too, because I wouldn't be available to them had I not healed the scars and the wounds from domestic violence. So I did my work. I was ready. I was prepared. I had a high-powered attorney. I was ready to leave, and with love and prayer for my partner, saying, you're not healthy, you're not well, and I wish you only the best. I now need to take care of me and raise our children, and hopefully you'll get the help you need so you can become a healthy male role model and father to our children. So what do you think happened?
I know what's going to happen now, because all of our stories are the same, pretty much.
So in comes family court.
Yep.
Never, ever, ever anticipated this abyss. It is a black hole. Mm-hmm. I don't remember becoming cognizant, at what point I became cognizant that it was a money-making machine, that it exploits families in crisis for money. That took me time. Interestingly enough, you'll like this one. I never attended a domestic violence support group. And as an abused woman with police reports, with pictures, with evidence, I never attended a support group until I was in family court. And the reason why, I recognized that I was being re-victimized, re-traumatized, And I was suffering with a whole bunch of new ailments that I never had before.
Yeah, the legal abuse, right?
Absolutely. The legal abuse, and it triggered post-traumatic stress disorder for me. I was diagnosed with PTSD. I couldn't even function, and I couldn't get out of bed. Now, I'm out of the marital home. I'm in my safe place. I have a right as a woman and a mother to live in an abuse-free life. That is a right that I have, a fundamental right that I have to raise my children free of abuse. Yet, the family court system, they played their games. It's about patriarchal power. And they let me know in no uncertain terms, I was considered property, and my children were considered property of my soon-to-be ex-husband. That flatlined me. If I can pick a low moment in my life, it would be the time, it was Mother's Day. I just got a motion 2 days before, a decision from the judge 2 days before. And that's when I realized I had no rights. They didn't give a crap about my children, their safety, their well-being, our economic stability, our health, nothing. And I recognized that I was powerless. What that did to me was I almost didn't come back from that, Geerte. I almost didn't come back because I couldn't function. I couldn't get up from bed. And from that Friday to that Sunday, I was just in bed crying and sobbing and sobbing and sobbing because these little babies were crying, saying they wanted to be with mom, that they feared dad when he was in that mood. Mm-hmm. But I'm not allowed to talk about it because every time I talk about it, it's parental alienation, and I'm trying to interfere with the father's relationship with the children. Yet they would not consider what his behavior was or what he physically did to harm the children. We ignore that. We're just going to turn this around and try to put it on the mother. And when I recognized that I was in another universe.
Yeah, it's like a parallel universe is what I call it. Everything you'd expect to happen is completely turned around 180 degrees. No.
Yes, despite being the primary caregiver. And this is so essential. When we're talking about divorce and custody issues, no matter across the board, whomever is the primary caregiver should retain the primary caregiving status. Yeah. Sometimes it's both, and that's wonderful. But when we're talking about abusive situations, there's primarily one parent that's the primary caregiver. And in this case, that was me as a stay-at-home mom.
And that's also the primary attachment figure for the children. And this is already proven by science how important this is for the development of children.
We know that. The research and the science is behind that. We have so much information today about how important it is for those attachments for children, especially birth through 7, that how essential that is for their brain development and functioning. And we have so much research now, which we should get into, about the ACE study and different research modules that are demonstrating that it's a matter of, it's a health crisis if we don't step in and protect these children and keep them away from toxic stress-producing environments. And when there's domestic violence, or when there's sexual abuse, or when there's a drug or alcohol addicted parent, or when they separate the child from the primary caregiving parent, those are toxic stress-producing situations that will cause those children, lasting from their childhood into their adulthood, health consequences that will also shorten their life expectancy of as much as 20 years. Wow. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but the only other study that's similar to that research that came out of the CDC and Kaiser Permanente is the tobacco. The tobacco research was linked to 10 leading causes of death. And the ACE study, Adverse Childhood Experiences study, is linked to the 10 leading causes of death in the United States.
You want to bring up you want to share the screen and show the audience the ACE study website. I know you have a link that shows the research and shows these consequences that you're talking about now, which is so important for the viewers to look at.
Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay, so this is really important for our audience to know. Certainly when you're a protective parent, you're becoming more educated and more involved with these issues, and you have some of this research. But for the general public, the people who don't know that this is happening, don't take our word for it. Just Google some information like ACEs Too High. Visit this page. This is called ACEs Too High, and it's acestoohigh.com. This is a really important website because they have continual articles, research, and information about the ACE study. And the ACE study is one of the largest medical investigations ever conducted to associate health consequences to children being exposed to toxic stress. This is so important. This research is so important because we know if we can prevent ACEs, then we can now protect the health and well-being of our entire community. You know, our primary function must become preventing ACEs. And preventing ACEs is protecting children from exposure to domestic violence, sexual abuse, being separated from their primary attachment parent, or a parent that has an addiction to drugs or alcohol. Very, very important research. So if you go on to ACEs Too High, you'll be able to find articles, information, that's really important that you can share within your community. You can share it within your schools, your pediatrician's office. You can share it with your attorneys. Not that I know many of them will read it.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
But this is an important, very important tool for us to use to educate ourselves. And a lot of great things have come out of this study. High schools around the country are now taking this model and they're implementing it in troubled schools. And this is really important. You'll find information about it on ACEs Too High. And what they found is when they have schools where there's a high dropout rate, there's a high truancy rate, there's a high level of children getting into all kinds of trouble. When they looked at the research and they trained the faculty, the staff, the volunteers, provided support for the parents and provided support for the children, the rate of high school graduation went up a ridiculous amount just by looking at this research, the ACE research, and applying it. So no longer when a child is acting out and they get in trouble in school, and, you know, sometimes they're met punitively by their behavior. But when you're trained in trauma and you have that knowledge and you have those tools, you're not asking the child, what's wrong with you? You're asking the child, what happened to you? Do you need help? Is there something I could do to help you? And just by those simple change of questions, we see children open up about, you know, why did they break into the school? Well, because they're homeless, and that's a warm place to sleep at night, you know, things like that. And that's a real situation, by the way, of a child that could have been expelled from school. But school was her only way for survival. So there's so much that we can gain from this research and information that will help us protect our children. And in fact, by protecting our children, we are preparing our country and the world for a healthy future. It's the most important work that we have going on right here, right now. Protecting our kids, protect humanity.
go ahead and stop sharing your screen so we can see you again. And I'm just trying to fill with my light because I'm kind of looking right into it. This is a really important website. And I also, when I had my interview with Barry Goldstein, he also brought this up because it's included in the Safe Child Act. And you are working. Yeah, you're working with Barry as well on getting the Safe Child Act passed, yes?
Yes. Barry is remarkable. We have a lot of incredible people in the United States and all around the world that are doing the work. They're on the grounds. They are on the ground getting this information, this research out there. And Barry is a remarkable human being that really fights for women and children. He really gets it. And we need more advocates and activists like him.
Absolutely. So, but when you went to court, back to your story, the attorneys weren't trained to understand the ACEs, and neither are the judges. They still aren't, apparently, because my daughter's still in this. But what happened in your particular case? Because we kind of left off your story where, you mentioned like it's a completely different universe to land, and it seems like when you get to court, none of this research is being applied. And how did that play out in your personal case?
Getting back to that moment in time, when I realized family court just ran over me and backed up and ran over me again and several more times, I think that my saving grace was calling the National Hotline for Domestic Violence. And I called them many times in the middle of the night, at all times during the day, on the weekend. I was kind of like getting courage because I knew I couldn't function. When I had to send my children and they were being abused. And I had to deal with that and I have to be quiet about it.
Yeah.
And I wasn't, and believe me, I wasn't. Which was to my detriment, right? Because my children are coming home. I'm getting a call from the police department that my child ran away from the father's home, and I learned to find out that there was physical violence involved, and my 12-year-old is missing in the middle of winter and ran out with no jacket and shoes and no socks. With snow that was probably 3 feet high. And I'm looked at as a parental alienator. So those were the issues that I was dealing with at the time. And going to court, I remember going on a particular day, and it was right before New Year's. And this incident had happened, and it was horrific. One of my children were physically harmed. The other one ran away. There's fear. There's tears. It was a crisis. And I petitioned for an emergency application to have custody transferred to me because Child Protective Services got involved and let them do their investigation and let the children retain with the mother where no violence has occurred. Their impeccable record, stay-at-home mother, primary caregiver, and I was attacked by the judge. Now at this point, I had no representation because I had no more money, and I went to court sobbing with my mother in the courtroom sobbing because she was the one who received my son who ran away because he ran 2 towns away to get to my. She was the closest one to him at the time, and sobbing for my children's safety to protect them. And the judge screamed at me and said, I didn't get a call from, they were called DCP&P today, but they were called DIFUS then. And if you're lying, you better hope you're not lying. I'm hysterically crying. I've got a police report. I've got witnesses in the courtroom with me, and I'm being screamed at that he wanted, I better not be lying. And he left the courtroom and went into his private chambers, made a phone call, and came back to find out it was true. Now, you would think now I have the support of the Child Protective Agency because I went to the hospital, had a psychological test done on my son, brought my other one in for his injuries. So now we have a report, we've got pictures, we've got everything to substantiate the allegation. So this is what it is going to court. You bring in an allegation. Can you substantiate it or not? That, should be the predominance of evidence like in criminal court, but as we know, that doesn't happen in family court. And the important thing here is that's when I realized he said he's not going to transfer custody. He's going to wait for Child Protective Services to do their investigation and ordered me to pay for my ex's attorney's fees. So I'm a panicked, abused mother, panicked and abused, trying to protect them and not being able to sleep and not being able to function. And that's the way I was treated. I'm an abused woman in the courtroom, and he's treating me as if I'm the perpetrator. Yeah. I've done something, and he's not showing any sign that he was going to apply even the law, domestic violence law. The children were abused, and I brought that up. And that's another important thing to mention. When I came into family court, and I had a very expensive attorney, he said to me, and I'll never forget it, do not mention domestic violence. If you mention domestic violence, the judge is going to turn against you. He said, Patrice, you are economically well situated. You will continue to be a great mom, and you'll get on with your life. Well, what I didn't know was that his life was going to get better, and his family's life was going to get better because they extorted all my money. And 4 law firms later, I was nearly bankrupted, penniless, and had to choose between gas or milk. There are days that I literally had to choose between milk or putting gas in my car to get my children to school. And that's what family court did. So having that support of the National Hotline for Domestic Violence out there, they connected me to a local domestic violence agency. Now, again, remember, I wasn't still 100% connected to the premise that I'm an abused woman, right? Because I'm empowered. I'm doing something. I'm taking action. So I went to a local group that they had recommended in my area, and I remember sitting in the parking lot thinking, if I go into this meeting and all these women have horrible, violent stories and they've been put in the hospital and horrible things, I'm not going to go because I won't come back because it's not my story. And boy, was I surprised. Boy, was I surprised because there were 12 women in that support group, 10 of which had the exact same story as me. Women who were victims of domestic violence, whose children were exposed to it and or were victims of it and or were child victims of rape. And these mothers were losing custody. They lost all their finances, their homes, their careers, friends, everything, trying to fight to protect them and their children's rights to safety. And I was like, oh my God, it was a lifeline. It was a lifeline, because the worst thing for any survivor anywhere is to think you're alone. When you think you're alone, you feel completely hopeless and powerless. But the important thing which I'd love to get out across this message today, we need each other. Mm-hmm. It's imperative that we find each other, that we support each other, and we grow this community. Because especially having someone who lived this, I was not functioning. I was getting up, I was taking care of my children on the days that I had them, and then I was getting right back under the covers and pulling the pillow up over my head because I couldn't function other than just bare necessities at some point. I was lucky. Some of these moms that I met did not have custody of their children. So I'm learning that, wait a minute, I think I've got it bad. she's got it so much worse. And what are we going to do about it? And that's how the Nurtured Parent was born, because this support group is a 6-month program. And believe me, it's a lifeline. And if you have one in your community, I highly recommend it. Mine was called Alternatives to Domestic Violence. And the reason why they were so successful is they have a batterer program as well as a victim program. They get the full picture of what it looks like. So they're able to identify it and provide proper responses and resources to both the victim and the perpetrator. But it's a 6-month program, and when you're done with the program, you're out. You can go back in, but you got to go on a waiting list. And when you're in crisis and this is your lifeline and this is the first time you're breathing again, you don't want to wait. You can't wait. You just found people that you can share your story with that doesn't look at you like you have 3 heads. It doesn't ask stupid questions like, I don't understand. Like, why would a judge ever do that? That's not possible. That's not legal. Are you sure? Are you hiding something? Is there something wrong with this mother? You don't get that from survivors of family court. You don't get that. We get it. There's no explanation. It really goes into how do we support, nurture, and empower each other. So the Nurtured Parent was born out of a lunch one day that I organized coming out of ADV. And because we were bawling, we didn't want to leave each other. We just had hope. And the Nurtured Parent was me crying, saying, I should start something. I should start something. And the wonderful people in my life that were supportive, they were like, why don't you start something? And when I'm not a licensed therapist. I did study psychology. That was my major. But I didn't feel competent enough to facilitate a support group. My marriage counselor, Dr. Mary Mandis, God bless her soul, said, I will do it with you. You don't need me, Patrice, but I will do it with you. Yes, and I did need her. She doesn't think I did, but I did need her because we all need our supportive women. Right? We all need somebody to get behind us and hold us up when we're starting to topple over. And when you're living in crisis 24/7, because if you cannot protect your child, you are living in toxic stress producing chaos every day.
Yeah, we should recall this program, Hell is for Protective Mothers and Children.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so that began with, I think it was 8 women at the time, 7 or 8 women. We started the Nurtured Parent, and we've grown to about 250 local members. We have about 1,000 statewide, and we have thousands internationally and nationally and internationally. We really fundamentally at our core, we're a support group.
So I'm sharing the site right now for the viewers to take a look at. If there are any protective mothers, and I know there are protective mothers watching the show right now, if you go to nurturedparent.org right here, you can see where I'm going to assume that there are group listings on this site. Is that correct?
Well, I have some important news to share. I'm excited to tell you we have a new website in the works. I have a very talented man and company, Somebody Marketing, working on our new website, because this was just, something that I did myself years ago, and I'm not tech savvy. However, now that we're growing and we need to grow and connect, we are going in a whole different direction. We're fundamentally a support group, a peer-to-peer support group, and it's free, which is so important. Many of our moms have to take a bus to get to us because they've been economically abused to the point that they don't even have a roof over their heads. So we have to keep it free and accessible. But now, as we're growing and we're recognizing the importance of this, because as we nurture and empower each other, that's movement building. We need a movement. We need a revolution. And the first thing that we need to do to get us there is to nurture our moms. And
Yeah, we have to be healthy enough in order to function. If we're in bed with the covers over our head, we're not going to be able to unite and get the action going to create change.
that's right. And it's unbelievable the power that we have to give each other, because sometimes we are so, it's soul siphoning, really. So you're in that state, and then you have a friend that you've met through your support group that's texting you, I didn't hear from you today. Are you all right? Do you need anything? Sometimes she can't even get up to make a pot of coffee. Well, if I'm available, I'm coming over and I'm bringing you coffee, and let's get you showered and let's get moving and let's get outside into nature. The power that we have for each other's healing. Our health and well-being is dependent on each other's. And okay, where you are or who you are, our health and well-being is dependent on each other's. And when we get that and recognize we have a responsibility, we have a moral responsibility, we have a human responsibility.
Absolutely.
So the new website is going to give us an opportunity to now showcase our activism part, because mostly we've been about support, and that's essential. That's our foundation. You know, finding each other, helping each other heal, giving each other resources and information. Little things like, what about a mom who can't open her mail anymore? She has such severe PTSD. I wish you lived near me. But you know what? You can call me over the phone, or
you'll walk me through it, opening the envelopes.
The important part of it is that you're not alone, and I want to be there for you. And there's so many of us that want to give back. So when we recognize I can't open this, and can somebody help me, and somebody say, absolutely, you don't touch that envelope. I'll be there with my gloves, and I'll go through it. I'll go through the crime scene with my gloves on, and we'll get through this, because we don't want to panic, and fear is very destructive.
Mm-hmm.
And being in this situation, being in this abyss, being in this system that we didn't even know existed, finding that fear, I find all the time, fear disables. It disables us, it disempowers us, and we need to get out of our brain, which is where fear, anxiety, our ego is, and plug into our soul and connect to each other from there and nurture each other from there, because then we'll be able to move mountains. When we're out of here, the fear, anxiety, stress, and we go down and we connect. That, and I'm saying to you something that's basic stuff, but it's so hard for any protective mother to do if she doesn't have a supportive community behind her. It is so hard to do. It is so hard.
Part of that support is educating yourself on, why do these controlling men do that? And I know you work with Lundy, and I want to bring up his website here. So people who are not familiar with Lundy Bancroft can go to his website, lundybancroft.com. And he's the author of the book, Why Does He Do That? Inside the Minds of Angry and Controlling Men. This was actually the book that I read when I realized my marriage was completely dysfunctional and toxic. And I read this, a friend of mine gave this to me, and she said, you need to read this. And I read it, and I was like, wow, I just read the entire profile of the father of my daughter. And it was because of his book that I was able to make the choice to move on and do it in a safe way. So for all the moms out there who are still trying to get a grip on why the men are doing this and what we're actually dealing with, what the dynamics are, I highly recommend this book, and he's written several other books as well. And this is also the webinar that you're putting together, yes? With Lundy. Why does he do that? Can you tell us about that?
Absolutely. Just like you, I read his book, and I was like, he's writing about me. How does he know my ex so well? This is just, it blew my mind. It woke me up, and it gave me the ability to fight back. That's what Lundy Bancroft does for so many women, so many survivors all around the world. We recognize that it's not us, because they had us conditioned for so long into thinking it was us. And, you know, one of the favorite statements my ex would make is, no matter what horrible thing he just did, he would follow it with, it's because you. Not take any responsibility for anything he said or did, or the harm he caused. He always turned it around. And to find a book that explains it all so powerfully, but the important part is, you know, I do want to say, in my situation, I couldn't have been in a healthy place to put myself in a situation where I was controlled by my partner. And I had to do my healing in that area. I had to recognize, for me, that my children were the greatest gifts on this earth, and I thank God for them every single day. I used to be a preschool teacher, love working with little ones. It's just an honor and a privilege for me. What I was giving my children in that toxic environment was how to be an abuser and how to be a victim. That's what the most important life lesson that I could give my children. I'm telling them that. That was the light bulb. That was the beginning of my process to get out. And I continued with the healing and the reading and the empowerment and the connection. But, you know, family court really disabled me for a large chunk of my time there. Because when my children were being abused, the heck else am I able to do? Not a lot. So having that supportive community, having friends that understand and may have come before you, and they can share their wisdom or advice, or just having a friend to go out for drinks with, that you can talk about these things and not have crickets, you know, because this is a really important part that I want to share. For the world, for our community out there that is fortunate enough to never have stepped foot in family court. First of all, thank God, and God bless you. I pray you never have to enter family court.
We need Lundy Bancroft to write a book. Why does the family court do that?
Exactly. It's so important. It's so important for us to talk about this, about the unbelievable gender discrimination in family court, which favors white males who are entitled. So they have finances or connections. It favors them. Now, I want to say the nurture parent is called the nurture parent because we have some abused fathers too. And although predominantly and vastly the numbers are women, we do have some fathers too. And when they are abused by their partner or their ex-wife's new partner, they're met with the same fate as us in family court, because an abuser will use the system to exploit a victim. And it doesn't matter if it's a father or a mother. But I will tell you for sure it's predominantly women because of the economic instability from the get-go. So immediately when we get married, we lose some status. When we have children, we lose more status. And then try to go to family court with an abuser and fight for your children. If you're a stay-at-home mom, they will use that against you. If you are a working, powerful, empowered woman, they're going to use that against you. No matter what, you can't win because it is skewed towards males. And that's something that we must address. For every American and for everyone around the world, we must discuss gender-based violence issues. It's so important to address this because when we're talking about gender-based discrimination, how does that impact our greater community? Because if I'm abused and I'm not functioning, and now my kids are dealing with that, and then they're going and they're being abused, and then they're in school with your kids, you think it's not your problem?
Yeah. And later on, they will be dating other people's kids, and it will impact their lives. It's a societal problem, you know?
It is systemic, it is endemic, and it is imperative that we start addressing it as such. Because if we don't begin to share this information. Now, I find that when I talk about mothers' issues, I lose half my audience. That is so irritating to me. I just have to tell you. It is so irritating to me because when we're talking about issues that when somebody's hurting and we should rally behind that, I lose half my audience, men and women. When we talk about fathers' issues, same thing. When we talk about children's issues, you start to get people to pay attention. It kind of takes out, and this is just in my experience, it kind of takes out the he said, she said, ridiculous, stupid standard. I don't know where it came from, and we should never, ever say that in family court again. When it comes to domestic violence or sexual abuse, it is not he said, she said.
Right.
Okay, it is abuse. It is a crime, and it should be handled as such.
And it should be handled in criminal courts.
Now, we know that the criminal courts are far from perfect. We know that. But in a criminal court, we have a judge, a jury of our peers, a prosecutor, an open courtroom. We have the ability to have support, media, anyone there to cover the case. But when you're in family court, there's one judge. There's nobody reviewing that judge. That judge's ethics, whether they're following the law, applying the law, there's no oversight. So now you have no jury, no prosecutor, no open courtroom.
And no lawyer as well. Whereas in criminal courts, you are assigned a pro bono lawyer if you don't have the money.
That's a really essential point. If I killed somebody, I'm going to get free legal counsel. But if I'm an abused mother trying to protect my abused children, I'm shit out of luck. And
yeah,
it's awful.
If you're in jail for murder, you get to see your children. But if you're a protective parent and a college professor, you don't.
Well, call it what it is. If you are in jail and you're a male, you're going to get to see your children.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the standard works the same way for women, and that's something that we have to address. I mean, I'm not sharing anything that isn't common knowledge and anything that couldn't be researched and pulled up and substantiated, because this is really a problem around the world. And until we have equality, until we have a right to our body, until we have equal pay, we're going to continue to have these problems. So our work as far as activism, which, you were talking before about the stuff that I do, and when I hear you reading it, I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted because, the work of an activist, it just doesn't end.
It's 24/7. Yeah.
It's 24/7, wee hours of the night, where we're shooting up in the middle of the night in panic, right? Sheer panic. Because, it's horrific when it's your own child, absolutely. And it's difficult to function. As an activist, I'm hearing these crisis situations every single day. And I know you do the same. So you're dealing with individuals that are dealing with some of the most horrific crimes being committed. And we want to help them, and we want to do everything to stop it. And sometimes we can't. And that keeps me up at night. And certainly as we've grown as a support group and the other activist work that I did with the CJC, we started to grow with exposure. And now we have, unbelievable amount of response from women all over the world that need our help. And so I want people to know that even though I resigned from the CJC, all of that activist work is being poured into the nurtured parent.
Now, the CJC stands for Children's Justice Campaign.
Yes.
And we have a little video clip. Would you like to share that right now?
Sure.
Okay.
The video was created as a promotional tool for the CJC to raise awareness about these issues. I'm no longer part of the CJC, but I am a co-founder of the CJC.
All right. Well, Vicki, throw on the video, please, and let's watch it. Let's have the audience take a look at the video that was produced by the Children's Justice Campaign. I hope you can hear me out there. I'm talking to my...
When you're sinking in the crowd and your screams don't make a sound, just think of me. I will lift you off the ground, even though we seem so far apart. If you listen for me with your heart, I'll sing for you. I will.
Hi, I'm Kelly Rutherford, and this is
Patrice Lenowitz.
and we started the Children's Justice Campaign to raise awareness in the media about the injustices happening to children in the family court system.
The system has failed my children.
When you're in a domestic violence environment, you're in a fog.
My son just fell asleep on my lap, and I remember thinking on that flight, oh my God, this is like, I thought this is just going to be crazy.
The judge told me that the threshold was that my son would have to come home with cigarette burns on his back.
Listening to my children call me hysterically crying because they wanted to come home, and I couldn't do anything about it.
My mother needed to kidnap me and flee with me and my brother.
It was like one of those movies that you just cannot believe it's possibly happening.
I've been fighting for my two children for nearly 12 years.
I had been in court for 5 years.
Over 7 years.
6 years.
We were in court for 6 years, and by the end of that, we were penniless. This happens to be a silent epidemic, a systemic endemic problem in the United States family court system.
It's a system that has essentially no rules of procedure. It's a system that has essentially no rules of evidence. There's really no one watching out for children's rights in family court.
We stand up and we take the oath. I swear to tell the truth. People get on the stand and they lie.
She was forced this year to see my former spouse. One day, at one visit, she was in a fetal position in the hallway, and she was still being forced to see him.
There is domestic violence involved in my case, and the courts refuse to acknowledge it.
My son, his name was Prince, and in July of 2012, after a family court therapist came in and withheld information from the court, there was a judge who granted unsupervised access to my son's father. After 4 unsupervised visits, he was murdered.
The Children's Justice Campaign is truly going to create a revolution because its time has come. It's now time for us parents, us educators, us court protectors and the protectors of law to understand that what's missing in all laws to do with family is the voice of the child.
Children deserve to be heard. They need justice.
The public can't protest what it doesn't know, and the public doesn't know.
It's important not only to see what is happening, but it's important to say what is happening.
Children's Justice Campaign is the idea that we must shine a light on the failure of America's family court.
We have a wonderful board. Right now it's made up of Lundy Bancroft, who's a domestic violence author, expert, Dr. Shefali Sabari, who wrote The Conscious Parent, Dr. Jen Trachtenberg, who's a pediatrician so loved, who knows about the health consequences to children with toxic stress, Kelly, who's a survivor, myself, a survivor and an activist, and Wendy Murphy, who has been a long-time champion of children's rights and children's issues. So together, I'm so grateful that we're in this place together because we are devoting our lives to the safety, health, and well-being of our nation's children.
All right, so that was the YouTube video. Well, it's actually not on YouTube, but we shared it here, so it's now on YouTube, of the Children's Justice Campaign that you started with Kelly Rutherford and Wendy Murphy and several very other important people that,
amazing people that care about children.
Yes. And so let's go back to how you even got to that point, because we were in your story and you were at this point battling pro se. Yeah, we're kind of going in and out.
Sorry.
That's okay, because it's perfect, right? I mean, the video that we just saw is produced because of your own battle. And you ended up going pro se. You were bankrupted, just like all of us. And you ended up going into court and presenting yourself, and then you went through an entire ordeal with that, which eventually led to the Children's Justice Campaign. So let's get into that, because I'm sure the viewers are interested to hear how you were able to unentangle yourself from this mess.
Well, it's quite a horror story, because I honestly don't know, if not by the grace of God and a loving, supportive community, I never could have made it through. What they put me and my children through, and personally being diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and having the judge deny my ADA accommodation, it's just one thing after another, the violations against my basic rights. And I'm just going to step back for 1 second, because you and I left off before talking about criminal court and family court. Just picture, if you will, if I walked out into a supermarket parking lot and somebody beats me up, and somebody calls the police, and the police come and they arrest the person that beat me up, and now I have to go to court. I'm a supporting witness for the prosecutor because a crime was committed against me. I do not need to hire an attorney. I just need to show up. It's an open courtroom with a jury of my peers. There could be media there. I feel the safest, and I have the best chance of justice in that environment. Well, what if I go outside the supermarket and it's my partner or spouse that beats me up? How come I don't go to criminal court? How come I'm sent to family court because I'm a mother? How did I lose my basic rights as every other citizen of my country? Because now when I go to family court, I have to get my own attorney. But what if he controls all the money? And now I have to defend myself against my abuser in a system that systemically is biased against women. So now going back to being in that situation and having 4 law firms, and I think about $250,000 I spent out of my savings, everything I had, sold jewelry for attorneys, sold my grandmother's jewelry to pay for my attorneys, who would have the audacity to say, I have to pay my mortgage. That's justifying their fees. So paying your mortgage is more important than me losing my house? Because I've already given you tens of thousands of dollars. Why is this still going on? Why isn't it handled immediately? Why? Because it's a corrupt system, fundamentally corrupt from its core, top to bottom, left to right. It is corrupt. It is a system that is designed to extort families in crisis for money. And who's typically the gender that is the subject of being abused? It's going to be female, and unfortunately, male and female children that are caught up in it. So for me, probably one of the most difficult times of my life, and probably the period that I aged the most, and probably when we're talking about toxic stress from the ACE study, why my kidneys has shut down in my lifetime, unexplained, and different other things, ailments have occurred to me, it's from the toxic stress. The toxic stress that I lived through in family court, being denied an attorney. Now, it's important to mention that when I recognized that my first law firm were taking my money, essentially stealing my money, because they weren't properly representing me and my children's rights to safety, I fired my attorney. The judge that was hearing my case denied me firing my attorney because my divorce hearing was soon. And to him, it was logical to keep this attorney on because to get a new attorney on, they'll have to get familiar with the case and it's going to take longer. No, my attorney and the judge were friends. That's why he denied me to remove my attorney, which I fired. And I fired him telling him everything I thought of him. So you can imagine having now to walk into court with this man that I said everything I thought. Now, fast forward all those years later, 4 law firms later, I'm going to a trial finally, almost 6-7 years later, penniless and going through this, getting through day by the grace of God. I have an attorney who asked to be removed from my case 30 days before my trial because I owed her $7,000. I had paid her up until that point tens of thousands of dollars. And that $7,000, like everything else, beg and borrow to get that money to protect me and my children, I would have done that. And the judge said yes.
Mm-hmm.
So remember now we're down $250,000, right? So I've got nothing. And
before you go on, I want to point out that this is something that's also systemic. In my case, this happened as well. I had an attorney and she dropped my case 1 week before the trial. This also happens. We just had a case where this also happened, and a lot of moms responded to a Facebook post about this and all stated, this happened to me too, this happened to me too. So it's a game that they play. The attorneys will fleece you for your money, and by the time you're just about to hit broke, they'll remove themselves from the case, and it's usually about a week before you go to trial. So you're all ready and pumped up, and
so for years we were working towards this goal for years, because at the trial, quite possibly, maybe I can get justice now. I don't know. But I know I have to continue trying because there's nothing more important than my children. So I'm going to keep this thing going, not knowing that I'm caught up in this hamster wheel with them. It's the cottage industry of unscrupulous professionals that use someone like me and my children for their economic gain. So now I have 30 days before my trial, my attorney wants to leave the case and my judge says she can. And I'm just like, wait a minute. I tried to fire my first attorney and I wasn't allowed to. And now I'm just about to go into a trial that's taken years for us to get to this point. And my attorney wants to leave and you say yes. Now, another important note is there are some good attorneys out there. They're not a lot, I'm going to tell you right now, but there are some good ones. And I had an attorney that worked in New York that was going to work for free when this happened to me. And I was, devastated and hysterically crying and reaching out to all of my advocates and activist friends saying, I need help, 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 help. And Mayday, Mayday, I need help. And this attorney was willing to work with me, and he said if I can get an attorney, I live in the state of New Jersey, if I can get an attorney that can host him because he doesn't have a license in New Jersey, that he will represent me. And this is an attorney that happened to do amazing work for victims in New York. So I'm blessed, I'm grateful, I'm thanking my lucky stars, and my judge says no. He says no because we're right before a trial and it's going to take this attorney too long to get caught up in the case. And I said, no, it's not. He's got all the information. He's read everything, which I know that they don't. The judge certainly hasn't. He's read everything. He'll be ready to go in 2 weeks. And he said no. So I'm denied representation now. I'm denied. I am ordered as a domestic violence victim. I am denied representation at my trial. And now I'm cross-examined by my abuser and his abusive counsel. Worst time of my life. Worst time of my life. I can't imagine, I remember very vividly the acid buildup that I had in my stomach from the stress and vomiting just acid. I wasn't sleeping. I certainly wasn't eating. I wasn't sleeping. I was stressed out every day trying to fight for my life, more than that, fight for the lives of my children. And I have to go through it in this way. And it's important to mention, too, during this process, DIFUS was involved in my children's lives 3 times. 3 times they did an investigation. Twice they were unsubstantiated. Now, if any of you, and I know a lot of you out there that have suffered by the injustice of this system, it's another government-run agency, our Child Protective Agency here in the States, biased against women, biased against protective mothers. When my 3rd investigation came around, it wasn't my first rodeo. I started getting my knowledge, my information, my power, my support. 3rd time around, I let the investigator know, I have an attorney and I will sue you and your agency if you fail to protect my children this time. With all the evidence you have, there's nothing else that should come of this than substantiation. And fortunately, they did substantiate it. Now, what do you think? I've got that document. That document says that my ex is the substantiation was child abuse and neglect against my ex. I bring that to court. Guess what? The judge didn't allow it in as evidence. So, my story, like I say, is painful for me, and it's painful for me to share with you, but it's nowhere near as painful as the mothers that lost custody to their abusers, or the mothers who lost their lives because the courts failed to grant them restraining orders. And how incredibly dangerous it is of the Bar Association. And that's something I want to get into as well, because that truly is the American mafia in the United States. The Bar Association, exploits victims in crisis, women and children. We know that. But they work together. They're in cahoots together to protect the establishment above doing their jobs as public servants, and putting us in this situation and recommending that we drop restraining orders and put it as a civil constraint, not a restraining order, because it's better, because it looks to the judge like, you're working with them, and, you're not a disgruntled ex trying to get back at your ex-partner. How dangerous the Bar Association is for doing that, because women and their children lose their lives every day when our court systems fail to protect them. They have the ability to protect them when we're coming forward with evidence of violence, when we're scared for our lives. They have an obligation to protect us. And when they deny us, like we just had a vigil, and this is, one of the things that breaks my heart and scares me, as an advocate, as an activist. I want to protect everybody. I want to share the love and the knowledge, and I want us to work together to bring about radical, massive change. In the meantime, what happens when a woman is denied restraining orders and he's free, and they put the partner's career above a woman's safety? What happens? What happens is she's murdered, and or her children are murdered. And we've heard...
I'll share my screen while you're continuing to talk about it, because I started a database of the mothers and children who are murdered and also who commit suicide as a result of these situations. So continue. Yes.
So then there's situations like we're discussing where a mom here in New Jersey, last year we had the Battered Mothers Custody Conference in New Jersey. And it was in Secaucus, New Jersey. And I had a table there for the Nurture Parent and the Children's Justice Campaign, and I presented on a couple of things. But the most important job, our obligation there as presenters, as advocates, is to support those women who are bleeding from every part of their body. And our job is to help them the best that we can, to give them advice and resources and support. One mother came up to my table. Her name is Tamara Seidel. And she was a mom of seven children. Same father. Her father was a police sergeant. And her judge said, "Do you have any idea what a restraining order will do to your husband's career? Have you thought about how you're going to provide for your children if he doesn't have a job?" So basically, our bar association people put the economic status, a man's reputation, above a woman's life. She was murdered last year on the streets of New Jersey in Asbury Park. And not only was she murdered on the streets, but when she was bleeding to death in her car, his police officer colleagues did not shoot him, did not apply any force to take him down, and they allowed him to shoot her several more times while her daughter was in the car screaming hysterical. 7-year-old child. So, it's systemic, it's endemic, and I really think that together we can continue to bring out these issues. Your show is fantastic, and I'm really grateful for having the opportunity to be your guest today, because I want to talk about it as, yes, it's a problem, it's pervasive, it's horrible. What are we going to do about it? And that's how the next leg. So I went through this trial, economically devastated me up until that point, but I retained custody. I have joint custody of my children, but I never lost custody, and my ex wound up moving out of the state.
Yay.
The important thing that we must all remember is how well is a mother doing is completely dependent on how well her children are doing. And if we have no knowledge about their safety and well-being, and my heart breaks for you, how are you able to function and move on and become an activist? It's really, really hard. And for me, I had the blessing, truly blessing, of retaining my joint custody of my children. And we've been able to heal as a family. We've all been through the ringer for sure. And I have boys, so, who have definitely had issues to deal with because of the male role model that they grew up with. Fortunately, we've all done our work where we are consciously a family. And I share that when you talk about Lundy Bancroft and his books that save us and help us get out of that cloud of, I don't know what's happening, I just know I feel awful all the time. There are other books that I share with my support group, like the Dr. Shefali Sabari, The Conscious Parent, and The Awakened Family. The reason why that's so important for my support group is because I'm helping my parents heal from the inside. Self-care, essential. Support, essential. Exercise, eating well, essential. That connection, that community. We go on nature walks. We do projects like vision board making. We have outings. We're planning on going to a group movie soon together. That community is helping the moms like you and I who have been there, and some worse off. It helps us get out of bed and continue moving and give back. The most important thing for me in this tumultuous road I never expected to be here, Geerte. Never. An activist? What? That wasn't in the cards for me. This isn't something I chose for myself. A victims' rights advocate and activist. What? I mean, it sounds great, but I wouldn't have chose it for myself. It chose me.
Yeah, I would like to be painting right now. I'm a fine artist and I would like to spend my time painting. And here I am, fighting and networking and doing this show to spread awareness about this, to try and protect my daughter, who I haven't seen for 14 months. I've had no contact. These are extreme human rights violations. And I agree with you when you say that the Bar Association is basically mafia. And this is what we're up against. We are up against the mafia. I mean, when I tried to get local law enforcement in Marin County, California, to do a welfare check on my daughter, they are not willing to, and they don't give me any reasons for not being willing to actually perform their duties as they are ordered to. I don't know what to make of it, and so, I'm interested in your activism. Like, for example, you had the Freedom Riders bus tour a few months back. Share with the audience what that was about.
Okay, so, it seems like there's a next step, and then there's a next step, and there's a next step as an activist. So, at our core, at the Nurtured Parent, it's about healing and connection and nurturing each other and building each other. Then the next layer is helping them get through the psycho cases that they're in and try to help them get safely through the landmines, because we know that they're there, and it's our job and our obligation to help them avoid them. Then the next level is, what are we doing legislatively? And that's really important. Now, for me, I'm a newbie. I have to be honest. It's not like, this was my career or my education path. This is all new for me, and it's scary sometimes. But what propels me is my anger. My anger of knowing what's happened to you, what's happened to me, what's happened to countless mothers and their children all around the world. It propels me, and I'm channeling it to the best of my ability in activism. So we have a notorious judge in New Jersey. His name is Judge Paula Scandin, who, out of the 21 counties in New Jersey, and I have members from all 21 counties, that was the highest number of women that reached out to us. And I believe that 50 women came forward who were abused by this particular judge. So many years ago, our activism component started with protests outside family court. And these things are something all of us can do. You know how we protested? We went to one of our mom's house. One of our moms opened their house. Some moms bought snacks and drinks, because remember, we all don't have money. So bring what you can. If you can bring a bottle of apple juice, you rock, You can bring some crackers and cheese. Oh, my God. The other thing is to make these signs. We literally raided our children's bedrooms and their, creative closets, and we used paint and markers, and we created signs. And these signs, say whatever we need to say about the issue at hand, and particularly that mothers are forbidden to protect. So we go down and we've protested about particular judges before. We've had the good fortune of having some judges removed from family court.
Yes.
Now, here's the thing. They're still judges, and they could still be switched back into family court at any time. They particularly choose to keep them under the radar for a couple years before they bring them back. So hopefully the public or their victims will have dissipated and not have the strength to come back. We found out that this particular judge was being nominated for tenure by our governor. And what does that mean? That means that the Senate is going to take testimony about this judge, about whether he should be nominated for tenure. Now, the judiciary in the Senate is the department that overhears this, except they didn't know we were coming. And the good news for that is, when I got wind about this judge, and I know the horrific things that he's done to children, horrific things he's done to mothers, I knew we had to take action. And the Nurture Parent is a free support group. We don't have any paid salaries. So it's volunteers and the goodness and kindness of our community and friends that donate to make things happen for us. So fortunately, I put it out to the universe and I got a donation for a bus, a 50-seat bus with air conditioning and T-shirts. We even got a donation for T-shirts, and we had T-shirts made, and we got about 40 people to go down to Trenton, New Jersey for the Senate hearings on this particular judge. The good news is that we shook them up. The good news is that they had no idea what was happening, and we are, now remember, this is really important. The society thinks of abused women as, you know, something in society we don't even want to look at. We don't know who they are. It doesn't affect us. No, we're showing up as former doctors, as former professional teachers, professors and school teachers, as architects, as, you know, former, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These women are educated professionals, advocates and activists in the domestic violence field and in the child abuse prevention field. We are coming in force. We are the subject matter experts. We are there to testify against a public servant that is harming the greater community. That's our goal. What we were met with, it still bothers me right now, Geerte. And to tell you the truth, I'm quite angry about it. And that'll be the next activist trip. I'll have to let you know about it beforehand. But I can't get over how disrespected I was in the Senate, how they made me feel. Now, I'm a taxpayer, I'm a constituent, and I'm a professional bringing something to their attention, not just words. I've got evidence, I've got experts, and I've got testimony from the women that the judge has destroyed their lives, essentially. And wow, the first round of votes, they voted the judge in, I believe it was 7-4. What that means is he's still not getting tenure. It's going to go for a full Senate vote now. And the full Senate vote in New Jersey is 40. So 40 senators are going to vote on that. The next leg of our activism was now going to be to get in touch with every single one of those senators and provide them with all of the evidence and all the information so they could make an informed, listen to me, deformed. The system is deformed.
The system is deformed.
To make an informed decision about something that impacts the greater community. And we were circumvented by the Senate Judiciary Chair. He had the vote put on the schedule, not on the public. So it usually goes on the government website, and you could find out what's on the Senate agenda, and you also get a list of all the things that are going to be addressed and heard for that Senate hearing. It's not listed on it. And they circumvented the public by asking Senator Sweeney, the Senate president, to add it on to their agenda and have it be heard first. Because even if they put it on last, which they should have, because they had a full list already that went out to the public, and the public could expect what's coming, having it last still would have given us an opportunity to mobilize and get down there, right? They made sure that we were circumvented, and they had it put on first. Having it put on first meant that they were going to get this pushed through regardless of the harm that this judge has caused the greater community. And they voted him in 21-9, I believe it was.
Oh my gosh.
Now here's the good point, though. Here's a good point. There are 40 senators. Some abstained and they didn't vote. But the victory here is that was the second lowest nomination for a judge's tenure in New Jersey history. Our activism, our efforts, our t-shirts, our reaching out to the media and showing up, even when we couldn't get out of bed, being there made a difference. It made an impact. Now, as you and I both know, that is something we want to hold on to. We made a difference in that moment. However, what about those moms that are calling me hysterically crying because he got through? How do we now soothe them when they're in agony and the only justice they could have had by not having their child is to know that the criminal that stole their children for them can no longer hurt anybody else, but he's still a judge. So we've got a lot of work to do. We have so much work to still do, and we're not going to stop. So the Freedom Riders bus, we called it, is really important because that's what we're trying to build. We're trying to build a social justice revolution that puts our children as the most important thing in law and society, protecting the rights, safety, health, and well-being of our children and our women. And with your help, we're going to do that.
That's right. You're very inspiring. I hope that all the protective mothers who are watching are as inspired by you as I am. If I was in the United States, I would be looking to rent a bus because many judges I would like to visit here and have a little talk with them too. I know, for example, in my case, Marin County Court, there's Judge Wood and Judge Adams, and there's many complaints against them, and they had to appear in front of the California Judicial Oversight Committee this week. These are really important things. Like, even if you're down and out and you're in bed and you're crying, take 10 minutes of your day and type out a complaint that you sent in certified mail and submit it. Because if we all massively do this, at some point, we hope those complaints will get addressed.
Right. And that's so important because you may not be able to write it yourself and you may need the support. That's why the Nurture Parent is here. When we launch our new website, we're building a model which is really important that I wanted to share with you. One of the greatest complaints, if you will, that we get is that how can I have the Nurture Parent in my community? Because I don't live in New Jersey, or I don't live on the East Coast, or I don't live in this country. I really want you to have it. And we're right now I'm writing a book about the Nurture Parent, and the book is just basically going to say what we do, why we do it, and how you can do it too. We're creating the model. So, it's almost like an AA meeting where you have that supportive community every day, and you can find one anywhere you are, because we know that this is national and international, that these issues affect women and children all over the world. We want to be able to create something where we, the war veterans, can connect and support one another. And with that, once you're in that place, because years ago, I wouldn't have been able to be the activist I am today because I was bleeding out of every part of my body. How am I going to function without my lungs? And that's really what family court does to us. Not having the economic means to support me and my children through that process too is absolutely debilitating. And it's designed to be that way.
It's designed to paralyze us into that fear that you were mentioning earlier in the interview. This is how evil works, right? It tries to paralyze you into non-action. So what's really important is that you understand that this is how they work. And these are Nazi techniques. These are German Nazi World War II techniques. You traumatize the victim into non-action, and then you re-traumatize them, which happens through family court. So if you understand that that's the game that they're playing with you, and it's a life and death game, you can better protect yourself from it. When I experienced fear, I realized, okay, this is exactly how to try to trigger me. So I've now identified it. And because I'm able to identify it, I'm able to step out of it. That's already distance towards that particular feeling. And that's what I know, okay, I need to get up. I need to go and do the next step, make a list, and go check out my list, go do the work. And at the end of the day, I feel good because I resisted the fear and the Nazi paralyzing techniques that they are applying. And this is how you overcome the, the victim mind control that they're doing to us.
It's so important that we have a toolbox, and that's what we share in our support group. What's your self-care toolbox? And sometimes we'll sit down with our members and we'll actually write it out, because for everybody it's different. So for one person, running may be able to take them out of that paralyzing state. For another person, it may be meditation. For another person, it may be gardening. There are so many ways to take you out of that paralyzing fear, taking you out of your ego, connecting you back to your spirit. Because when we're in our head, we're not able to maximize our full potential. And it's important to go within, stay connected, take care of yourself by every means. So that may be writing in a journal. You might not be able to write emotion, but you may be able to write down how you feel that day. That's important and that's powerful. Doing something just for you, and sometimes that could be just a nature walk. A lot of the things that we share as our self-care tools are free because many of our moms are homeless. They may be struggling, they may be couch surfing at this point because they've lost custody, they've lost everything, and they have no means to sustain themselves or their children anymore. So it's important to go back to really basics on self-care, and that may be writing, that may be, exercising, on your feet. The pavement is free, so get out there. You got to keep moving, because a lot of our moms, and I'm speaking from experience here, I couldn't function. I wasn't moving. So, my health was absolutely suffering from the toxic stress. So keeping our bodies moving and then connecting to a supportive community. We're on Facebook. The Nurture Parent has a Facebook page. We're online. You can reach out to us. You can email us. You can call us. You are so important to us. And sometimes the turnaround isn't as quick as we'd like it to be, and I apologize about that, but we're getting better at it. And it's just the volume of calls and requests that we get every day. And we are now growing the Nurtured Parent, and soon we'll be better able to get back to everybody in a more timely manner. But the important thing is we want to, the first thing that we do is we talk about self-care. No matter who you are, where you are around the world, how are you taking care of you?
And it's not just important in terms of fighting for yourself and your children. I would like to add, because you're bringing up some excellent points here, it's the ability to sustain yourself through it, and creates the opportunity for to stay strong. Because once you are reunited with your children, which I hope and I pray for all the protective mothers who are watching, at that point, it's really important that you're not a wreck on the couch, unable to function. Right. You have to be able to have a roof over your head and provide your children with what they need. Not only that, now you have traumatized children who are returned to you, and you need to teach them how to work through the grief of their stolen childhood, the anger that they feel about the adults that didn't make proper decisions for them. So you have to become their mentor, more even than just a parent.
And that's why I mentioned before Dr. Shefali's work, The Conscious Parent, because it teaches, it gives us the information that we need to raise ourselves into wholeness, so we can help our children heal
Yes.
and empower them to be the healthiest version of themselves. And that's essential. If they are going to get there, we have to get there first.
Yes.
That is the premise of the work that we do. It's focused on the parent. It's focused on our healing. Be the best version of you under the circumstances. Being the best version of you under the circumstances, and you will surprise yourself. I certainly surprised myself. I never expected to be sitting here with you today talking about these issues 10 years ago, that's for sure. But I'm grateful for the opportunity. I know how important it is. I know that we are too disenfranchised out around the world, and everyone feels so completely alone. You're not alone. We are in this together. And as we continue to grow, and as you reach out to the Nurture Parent and other organizations that do the work that we do, I do want to touch upon one thing that I think is important, because Wendy Murphy will mention this all the time about co-opted organizations, about organizations that take state and federal funding. Taking state or federal funding for any organization that does good work. And a lot of them, and I should say, if almost all of them probably started with the premise of raising these funds to do great work for a really important cause. And what happened over time was that state and federal money became conditional, because in order to get that money to keep your doors open to do the important work that you do, you got to do a dance with politicians. You got to play their game. You can't now go out and advocate as a victim's rights advocate. Your job, that's your job, to go out there and fight and give it your all to protect victims and make their future as safe and healthy as possible. When you can't do that as an organization because you're afraid of losing money, which will cause you staff or potentially cause you to close your doors, we've got a problem. Which is why the Nurture Parent has never and will never take state or federal funding. We've only operated by the kindness and generosity of our friends. Hopefully one day in the future, as we continue to grow, we'll be more self-sustaining, because, we need money all the time to help victims, to help, moms when their electricity is cut off, or, there's so many issues I don't even have to get into, but we do raise money for those things. And it's important that we build as a movement and we get more people involved, more people in Hollywood involved. That's so important that somebody start writing about this. Lundy Bancroft and I wrote a play together called Forbidden to Protect. And the play is about real cases. So these are stories told by the victims. And in a way that we felt the important thing is that you hear their story. And so, it's really not even fair to call us, playwrights, because it's really primarily the victims' words. And we wanted to do that for a real reason. We want people to hear from them, and we want to explain it in a way that really women are forbidden to protect their children. We are not allowed to protect our children in the United States or around the world, and that needs to end. That's just one small attempt. We're still working on it, and the reason why it's still a work in progress is because of the number of stories that we've received from around the world that are so horrific, and we're trying to base this in the United States where we're from, but it's the cases and stories. One is more horrific than the other, but it needs to be told. So this is our small attempt at getting some visibility to these issues and get some hope for these children. And we even have the stories of children who are now adults in the play. But we need Hollywood. We need wealthy philanthropists to get on this human rights violation that's happening across the world right now, a woman's right to keep and protect her children. We need business people to get behind and sponsor our events. In the work that I do, it's exhausting, as you know, because we are re-victimized ourselves. Our trauma is activated when you're working with somebody and you listen to their stories, and it rips you apart inside. But it propels me too. So there are days that I need to shut it down, and I need to take my own medicine and self-care and take care of me for a couple of days and shut it all down and close it down and clear the clutter and get out of here and get into here, and okay, how do I go forward? Then I get my creative juices flowing, and I want to put on a conference about these events. And we've been able to do things like that. And maybe I could pull it up on the screen. We had one last fall called, I'm going to pull it up right now. Excuse me, I'm putting on my glasses. This was a community, shared community project. And I was able to get a college to sponsor it. And now I have it up. So let me share the screen now. And let me find where it is.
Scroll to the bottom with your browser and you'll see that button that says share screen. Yep, there you go.
Okay. So I just want to explain this, that everyone has this ability, and some of us more than others, but we all are contributing. It doesn't matter if you're that mom that can't get out of bed. If you show up for the event, you're participating in the movement. If you bring information to your children's school or to a therapist's office or to a law firm, you're disseminating information that the public needs to know. Even bring it to a senior center. There's nothing greater for a senior citizen that has all the time in the world to write letters to our legislators, our senators, our congressmen. Give them a cause. Give them something to do. Let them know how women are being treated in this country. And I guarantee you're going to get support. So this event that we did at Pascack Community College, What Happens After She Leaves, it was a panel presentation. So I was able to work with the college, who were incredibly supportive of the work that we do. And they gave us an auditorium. It was filmed. We had, my friends on the panel with me, Lundy Bancroft, Barry Goldstein, Rich Pompilio. Important to note, Rich Pompilio, who started the Crimes Victims Law Center here in New Jersey, there's probably 70 or 80,000 attorneys in New Jersey. There's one pro bono crime victim attorney in New Jersey. And that's Pompilio. What a shame. I mean, if we don't have him, we're really in trouble. But what an incredible human being who really gets victims' rights, causes and issues and fights to protect us and our community and our children every day. So we were able to get a conversation started. And so what it cost us was showing up, because we had protective moms that donated the graphics to create the beautiful flyer that you're seeing right now. We got the college that donated it. We were able to get a CBS News radio commentator, host it, be our panel presenter. Through other women in the movement, I made connections with Carol Mirage. Carol Mirage is Nicki Minaj's mother, who is a domestic violence survivor. She has her own foundation in New York. She was our opening speaker, which was really important to get the young community interested in these issues, because it's so important that we get college students involved in this issue. So important right now, because this is their future, especially if their gender is female. This is their future. And it's so important that we get their support. So having somebody like Carol Mirage open for us got the young people saying, Nicki Minaj's mother? Let me go. And then we hit them with the information. Because, this isn't sexy. The work that we do, it's not sexy. And unfortunately, in mainstream media, sex sells, right? This isn't sexy. This is a true victims' rights activism cause, and we need everybody, all hands on deck. We need everybody's help, everybody's support to share the information, to get involved with, your local agencies. Start your own, like we did at the Nurtured Parent. There's no reason why anyone should feel alone. because you're not. You know, once you start connecting, my lifeline was recognizing that I wasn't alone. And now I was concerned about other people too, and they were concerned about me, which gave me the strength. So we've been able to put on different events like this over the years. I've done it at different colleges. It does get us some exposure. Very, very important that we have this type of exposure out there, because the mainstream public have no idea, unless you've been touched by family court, you or someone you love has been harmed by family court. You have no idea that this is happening.
All right, that's correct. And I just want to mention, for those of us who are not familiar, those people who are watching are not familiar with our cause, there are currently an estimated 2 million protective mothers in the United States alone. And often when we talk about our stories, we get retaliated against. So this is why these stories are hidden. It is a hidden pandemic. One of the things that I started doing is creating a database, and I'll share my screen here. When you go to my website here, and this will soon be an expanded database, you click on Mommy's side, you actually see all the names of the cases that are public. So these are very, very brave, courageous women that have gone public, or they have been murdered and their case gotten to the media. All these are clickable links. Feel free to click on them and go through it. You'll also see that all our stories are the same. When a guest tells me her story, it's usually I can already predict how it's going to develop over time, because there's a pattern to all our cases. Here you can also see the moms who are jailed and the fatalities I also showed. I'm going to be continuing to expand the database, because we need this kind of research to show the numbers. And this is all backed up by academic researchers. Academic researchers have estimated, a very conservative estimate, that 60,000 children a year get placed in the custody of abusive fathers and identified child molesters.
And I think that's severely low. I think it's severely low.
And that's just the U.S. So let's say.
But speaking from New Jersey alone, you know, we're just one state, and I can tell you the numbers are incredibly high. So if we pulled that together and really did the research to get actual numbers, higher numbers, to really support what we already know.
So this was
so that's great that you do that. Thank you so much, because I can only imagine the time and energy that you have to put into that to get that kind of research compiled.
Well, I actually teach research in college, and this is why I'm so happy that you are presenting this topic at colleges, because what we really need, and I'm putting this out there for those of you who are in the field of research, to please gather data for us as to how many moms there are going through this. This is my estimate that there are 2 million, because this has been going on for about 40 years. So this, and again, this is just the United States, but if we're looking at the global picture, what are the numbers that we're talking about? Probably 5 times that amount. I get contacted from all over the world every week by mothers who are dealing with this, mothers in Brazil, mothers in Norway, mothers in England, you name it. It's
Australia.
Yeah, Australia, everywhere. It's truly every country where this is happening. The fathers' rights movement in the United States that started this war on mothers and children in the 1980s really have infected the entire globe, and it seems like the United Nations is supporting this and facilitating this with their Agenda 21, where they actually are blatantly telling on YouTube that they want to rip up the family to have greater control over the next generations, to generate a revenue from the victim industry. It's sickening, and so.
And if when we were talking before, when I was talking about if a stranger harmed me, it goes to criminal court, but if it's my partner, I go to family court. What the public needs to know is it's a private, closed courtroom. The judge has the ability to kick out any supporters in there. So as an activist and an advocate, we often go as court watchers with our members. There have been times when I've gone to court, and some of these stories are so unbelievably wild, you just think, did I just hit my head and I'm unconscious? I've got all the facts here. I've got all the information. This child is being raped. The child tried to commit suicide. We have the hospital's report. We have the professional's report. We go to family court. She's a parental alienator, the mother now. The children are forced into parental alienation reunification, which basically is child abuse on top of child abuse for money. And to be in those courtrooms and to go as a court watcher and watch a mom, maybe 100 pounds soaking wet, have a judge threatening her and tell her in two different orders. One, you must take your children to parental alienation reunification therapy. After she was able to leave the state, after a prior judge protected the children, the father then was filing parental alienation, brought it back to the state. They didn't even live there. Another problem with the Bar Association. They don't tell our women where the children reside for the past 6 months is where the court has jurisdiction over. But many of our mothers go all over, move, fortunately, are able to move for whatever reason, or where they are. And then the father will file in a different county, in a different court, particularly by information from the father's rights movement, right? Because they're telling them where you can get the most play for your money. And they will make those women move to that court, but the attorneys are not telling them that court doesn't have jurisdiction. I can respond. You could have to get another attorney in your county so you can respond to that, but we're being ill-advised. So
yeah, this is exactly what happened to me, actually. You just completely told my story in like 30 seconds.
And I'm sorry for that. And I wish we knew each other because I wish I could have stopped that for you. But it's only knowledge from experience now, right? Just like you said before. It's just we know. Now we can predict these cases and how to prevent them. And sometimes, our advice is a little unorthodox now because we know that if you call Child Protective Services, they may fail your child. How do you circumvent that? You get your child to the hospital. You get your child to the hospital, you call the police from there so they can do a rape kit test on your child. You want to make sure that you get the evidence and you demand to see the prosecutor that day. It is essential that that child get videotaped immediately after that child has expressed sexual abuse. If we don't get that immediately, then they're able to water it down, and then they say that there's no evidence, and then they say that it's the mother, instead of the child expressing what their story is or what their hell is and protecting the child. So there's so much to this. There's so many facets to this that we could get into for weeks and months and years because it's been going on that long. But
well, I would love to have you come on and talk more about this in another show. For this particular show, we're kind of running out of time, but you just gave some really important tip about what to do in case of child molestation. So thank you for that final tip.
Really important because CPS will have to come in, but you make sure you make sure you protect your child and prevent them from botching it.
Yeah.
Which they do so often.
And I hope the celebrities and philanthropists that are watching this today or the YouTube recording of this interview really pay attention to this. It's a silent pandemic. We need help. We do this full-time, 24/7. I'm actually paying out of pocket for this show. You and I and all the other activists need to get paid to be able to do this full time. We need help creating documentaries, movies, music, artwork, books, and in order to achieve the change and a total reform and overhaul and the abolishment of the Bar Association altogether, as far as I'm concerned.
Certainly when it comes to victims' rights. Certainly when it comes to victims'
That's right.
rights.
Thank you for being on the show.
Oh, I thank you. I just wanted to say one thing because I didn't get this statement out. We need transparency and accountability in our family courts. So essential. For us to get anywhere, there needs to be transparent so we can find out what's happening in family court, and then there needs to be accountability. Judges should not be reappointed for tenure when they're harming the greater public.
As far as I'm concerned, family court should be abolished altogether and together with CPS. But those are just my thoughts. Thank you so much for being on, Patrice.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. It's been a true honor to me to have you on House for Children. So thank you.
My honor and my privilege, and I thank you for
Fight on.
God bless you.
Fight on. Thank you everybody for watching today's show, and I hope to see you all again next week on another episode of House for Children. Bye-bye, everybody.
We're in this together. We're in this together.
Bye.
Bye.